guess just to start with, when it comes to questions of Western separation, I'm curious if you might be able to speak to whether or not there are any people within your caucus that might hold some sentiments of Western separation.
No, but there are many that communicate what various constituents are telling them and talking to them about the frustration and really what I call the alienation that far too many people in Saskatchewan as well as other parts of Canada are feeling, and those feelings of alienation are a response to the policies that have been put in place over the last number of years, policies that, as you know, in this gallery and this province, that this government has opposed every step of the way since I've been leader and prior to that under my predecessor. And so, those feelings of alienation, anger, they shouldn't be discounted in any way. Those are Canadians. Those individuals are Canadians and they're Saskatchewan residents. And but I would say it's incumbent on myself as Premier to work with a new Prime Minister, the same government, but a new Prime Minister on making every effort to chart a path forward that is good for Saskatchewan, but also good for Saskatchewan within the nation of Canada.
So, sorry, to be clear, you're saying that none of your MLAs, no one in your caucus holds Western.
No, I think there's more in the media gallery that are actually on that space, in that headspace. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, I think there's some folks in the media gallery that are harboring some separatist sentiments. Which ones are they?
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, listen. I actually think it's alienation that many Canadians are feeling, and so if you're asking, are there caucus members that are, feeling frustrated with respect to the, use the examples, Bill C-69, the unconsulted introduction years ago of the carbon tax going to $50, never go higher, then very shortly after, it's going to go to $170 and musing about even higher than that. These are all responsive feelings that Saskatchewan residents have, and so, with respect to, feeling some of that frustration, I would hope that our caucus, being a governing caucus, is large enough that it's reflective of the communities that they represent. But I'm sure there's people that, yes, absolutely want to separate from Canada. I think you could narrow that down to largely being frustrated. Frustrated with the unconsulted decisions that have come from Ottawa for the last period of time. And should that change, I think you'd see those feelings of alienation wane.
Sure, I don't think that it's unreasonable to assume that within the coalition that represents the Saskatchewan Party that there would be some of those sentiments there within the electorate and within people that vote for the party. I suppose, how do you deal with that and how do you speak to that as the government party?
Find a path forward with the new Prime Minister, of which we're attempting to do, of which I spoke to the other day. Now, a path forward, in fairness, does look like a change in direction of policies coming from the federal government, because the feelings of alienation, much of the opposition that you've heard from me in the last number of years has been not proactive, has been responsive to policies that have been introduced by the federal government, and I think that's the same with respect to the anger and frustration that many Saskatchewan folks are feeling, and it's not just in Saskatchewan, it's in many other areas of Canada as well, and so it's incumbent on us to chart a path forward that is in, I say, the best interests of Saskatchewan residents, but also certainly the best interests of our province within the Confederation.
Just on separation, how widespread do you think it is? We saw Premier Smith yesterday saying it's not fringe.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I actually think it's pretty widespread within the NDP party today. We saw the NDP party in Alberta separate from their parent party, the federal party. And so that's a fair question for these folks here. Are you going to stay or are you going to go?
We did actually ask
Fair question.
about that last week. This is something she hadn't heard at the time, so it's something we'll ask her again about,
Sure.
That combination between...
I might too.
Yeah, you will. I'm sure she would.
We'll see how the speaker goes with
that.
that.
One thing I'd like to ask you is, we're focusing on this idea of Western separation, the people who are not happy with, the federal government and who feel like they're alienated. How about those people who are scared of Western separation, scared that can happen in our province? Because that's also a large amount of people. Could you speak to them specifically?
Yeah, and I would even break down, I don't actually think the number of, or there would be a proportion of people that might be lumped into by the media and other groups as being positive on separating from Canada, where that might not actually be the case. You said yourself, a lot of it is the frustration with the federal government. That's more a feeling of alienation, more a feeling of just not agreeing with the policies and the direction of the federal government. Should that change, I think you would see, some of that certainly settle down in the province, and that's what we're asking, and that's what I have asked the new Prime Minister to do, is to change direction on a number of topics, and to, going forward, consult with provinces and industries in regions and groups, communities in regions of the country where their policies might have an impact differently. And so that being said, as we find our way through this discussion, and it's a fair discussion to have, given the frustrations that are there, we all need to have our eyes wide open with respect to, what does conducting a referendum look like? There's a process for that, and we can discuss that. The process has been here for 40 years in Saskatchewan. We see the opposition trying to change that process. I doubt whether they'll be successful. But beyond the process, what is the environment like when there is potentially a referendum that's happening on potentially a province seceding from Canada? And it's only happened twice, and it's both times in Quebec. And I think I did some reading back into the mid-'70s, I think was the first time, if I'm not mistaken, and the mid-'90s was the second time that happened. And it definitely creates an unstable environment, an unstable investment environment. You're seeing, international and national companies that will start removing their head offices from they did from Quebec in both instances, and you saw people leaving and moving as well. And so if, our main concern the last number of years has been these unconsulted policies are creating instability in the investment environment and the opportunities that we have in Saskatchewan. In many ways, a referendum does the very same thing. But I think the talk of referendum, separation, alienation is all a response to, people just having it up to here with respect to the unconsulted policies that they don't feel are in the best interests of Saskatchewan opportunities and opportunities for people.
Yeah. I'd really like to bring First Nations into this conversation.
Right.
So last week we heard from the FSIN, and they're quite concerned about what's happening in Alberta. We spoke to them. They did bring up, of course, the Quebec separatism kind of topic that was happening, and the protests of the First Nations people there. And this is over their concern about their treaties essentially being honored. It's a federal issue, right? So their concerns within provinces are: is this going to, what's going to happen to us? This doesn't seem like it's constitutional.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that? Because that's the FSA here in Saskatchewan bringing that.
Yeah, there's a number of things. I think that maybe the Clarity Act had helped provide some clarity, as thus the title of it, with respect to what is a decisive majority, what is a clear question in this type of an environment, and then what negotiations would be entered into after the fact. There's RCMP, there's federal lands, there's national parks, there's obviously the treaty rights that First Nations, Métis and Inuit have across Canada that all have to be respected, and I think there's at a very high level some direction given with respect to what those negotiations would look like should a referendum happen, and should a referendum question be successful, and should it be the province's wish to actually attempt to enter into those negotiations to secede. So my point being, a lot of shoulds along the way, and we're very early in a conversation that we're getting to what the nuclear option would be. And I have said in the floor of the Assembly, and I'd say it here again, I certainly think there is another direction here that isn't the status quo and isn't separation. I think there is a real opportunity, and I think it is recognized by the new Prime Minister, the opportunity that we have in Canada to bring Canadians closer together. And it would be my hope that we're able to do that.
And I'll shut up after this, because I know there's a lot of questions, but just one more thing. If this were to become an issue here in Saskatchewan, people want to bring up a referendum, would you commit to saying that First Nations rights would be a top priority for you if that were to become something we're dealing with here in Saskatchewan like they are?
Yeah, not only a top priority, they'd have to be respected throughout that process. And that would be a conversation that I think First Nations leaders, should it ever come to this, whether it be in Saskatchewan or Quebec Alberta or anywhere else. It is constitutionally protected, and I think the treaties are something that we all want to honor. They're an agreement between Indigenous people and all Canadians, not just the Canadian government. So, certainly, again, way far down in the process of what potentially could happen in Canada, and has been attempted twice in Quebec. We feel there's just a tremendous opportunity here for the new Prime Minister of the existing government to chart a new course on behalf of all Canadians, and to be honest, kind of excited about it.
I'm just wondering if you've had any conversations with Unified Grassroots at all about their petition?
I know there's a number of caucus members that will, talk to folks that have been part of that group. I probably have too, in fairness. I mean, they have tens of thousands of people in their group, and I'm sure many of them are in my constituency as well. So I don't know who, but I could probably assure you that in the conversations that I have in my constituency of Rosthern Shellbrook or across the province, that there's no doubt that I have talked to a number of people that may, and I don't know who's kind of running or in charge of the group, or how who's, if they have a board, but I can assure you that I've likely talked to people that are part of that group over the course of the last number of years, and probably even over the course of the last number of weeks or months.
But have you talked about separation at all with any of these people?
So I don't know who these people are outside of that they might be part of this group, and I don't know how you become part of that group. But I've talked separation and the process of it, and the opportunities that we have in Saskatchewan to really grow our province within the nation of Canada with many people. And I would say that after that conversation, it's not uncommon for me to assess that many of those individuals aren't separatists in any way. They're just feeling a high degree of frustration with the feeling of not being listened to by the federal government and not being represented in the policies that are coming forward by the federal government, and really a deep sense of, at times, even anger, not only with it was really directed at the previous Prime Minister, but I think also, in fairness, directed at the NDP party that propped them up along the way too.
And Ms. Martins and Mr. Chan, the NDP shared online screenshots today of them being part of Unified Grassroots. Do you have any issue with them being part of this Facebook group at all? No, I don't. And I would say this. Whether they be the Canada or MLA in Martensville or Yorkton, I think the Canada in Martensville had 60% of the vote. We really appreciate people, even when they don't agree with us. We might not agree with their opinion on whatever side of the political spectrum they may be. When they're advocating for people to get involved in the democratic process at any level, that's a good thing. That's a very Canadian thing to do, and we should actually not condemn or ask to condemn, but commend those individuals for doing that. And I would say that I would say to anyone, regardless of their political stripe or who they're advocating for, if they are advocating for people to be involved in a nomination for any party, or to be involved in helping in the run-up to elections at any level, thank you. That's what we want.
If it came to a referendum
Can you tell us what your thoughts are on the meeting between Mark Carney and Donald Trump?
Yeah, it appears. I don't know the actual meeting that happened after, that went on for some period of time. I understand. I think we're going to have a phone call tomorrow, maybe a debrief and a chat between the Prime Minister and the Premiers, of which we'd be appreciative of. But it appears that it went well, and it appears that there's a certain degree of increased respect, or certainly a decrease of the lack of respect that we were seeing in weeks gone by. And so, credit to the Prime Minister for what I think was conducting himself very well in a very challenging environment with the Prime Minister, who represents a nation that's our largest trading partner and traditionally our closest ally. So we look forward to talking with the Prime Minister tomorrow. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like it's went very well, and probably has advanced at least the tone of the conversation moving forward between Canada and U.S. So I'm gracious for that.
Last couple questions.
Sorry?
Do you think it's setting us on a good path towards trade negotiations?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd said earlier, it's the Prime Minister and the federal government's job to really ensure that the President and the United States administration is aware of where Canada's position is on certain trade-related issues. What we can do then as subnational governments, and what we have been doing for a period of time, is, as I call educating and advocating in that space with the people around the President on the impacts of tariffs, how it impacts American business, how it impacts American families. And hopefully, and I know that some of that information has found its way through with some of the adjustments that we have seen on the tariff discussion over the last number of weeks. And so credit to Prime Minister Carney. It looks like it was a good meeting and improving relationships between Canada and the U.S., and that is paramount. So good for him and good for us.
In the event of a referendum on whether to stay or leave, how would you vote?
I would vote for a strong and united Canada any day and every day, and Saskatchewan to be part of that. Here is, I don't think it'll ever get to that. However, what I would say, and it isn't a government that is going to determine whether that happens. I said on the floor of this assembly that every 4 years Canadians have a choice, and they vote for who is going to govern them, whether that be municipally, provincially, or federally. In between, for 40 years, we've had referendum legislation in place in this province so that in between those 4 years, there is an opportunity for a voice. And if there's enough people that petition the government for a referendum, whether it be on what the future of Saskatchewan looks like or any other topic, they have that avenue. What we see, and a fair question in this province, is you are seeing a piece of legislation that is being introduced by the opposition where they want to take away that voice. That's wrong. Silencing the very voters that you vie to represent is just plain out wrong. The opposition leader and the opposition party is going to have to explain why that is their wish.
Thanks, everybody.